I work in the corporate development team at Pivotal. I've been working with all of the Platinums, which were just shown on the slide standing this up. So I have about 10 minutes to take you quickly through where we've been. I describe it typically as starting a government. I originally kind of described it as having a baby because it's about a 9-month process, but in general, not everyone loves the foundation you build, and I don't want people to tell me my baby was ugly, so I now call it a government. A quick history on the technical side. For those of you that didn't know, Cloud Foundry started inside of VMware. It was always an open source project, announced publicly in 2011, I believe, about 2 years of work before it was done. Shortly after, Pivotal was formed, and it was transferred to Pivotal. James, who couldn't make it tonight, published a couple posts around sort of our move towards openness. You know, the first was embracing external contributors, public roadmap, etc. A few months later, we talked about the community advisory board, which still runs today, and a couple of members actually in the room today. The Dojo program, open tracker, etc. So we've been moving along this road from kind of this single vendor project into a open development team. If you look at what's happened under sort of the first year of Pivotal, a lot's happened. Clearly, I'm not going to talk to the details around here, but the team is cranking. The velocity is very high, and a lot of code is coming out of this team, which is an important consideration because the community is growing quickly. And I think my slides are similar to his, but you can see lots of folks joining, lots of commits coming in, lots of pull requests, lots of activity, and what that translates to is a lot of developers. And in my example, my developers are pair programming, which we do at Pivotal. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. On the business side of the house, to kind of reset, again, it started inside of VMware, came inside of Pivotal. In February of this year, we announced with IBM and HP and SAP, VMware, and others, an intent to bring Cloud Foundry under open governance. And with that came this idea of platinum members that pony up $500,000 a year, gold members at $100,000 a year. And that was our initial set of announcements. And that's really when we kind of kicked off this process to turn this into an idea, into a real foundation. Shortly after, in May, you can see our group grew. A lot of gold stepped up. Intel joined. End users in BNY Mellon and Verizon, etc. About a month later, given the push for the trade show, the Cloud Foundry Summit that was coming, we landed a bunch more members. The summit showed up. Last week we announced we have about 44 members across all these different tiers. And what that adds up to is a lot of money, right? About a $5 million operating budget. And the challenge comes is how do you balance those two, right? You have lots of developers that don't want to be influenced by money, and you have lots of money that want to influence developers. And that's really the key in how you stand up a foundation. What do you do here? How do you balance that? So what we did is we got a bunch of really smart guys that have done this before. We took all of the sort of big brains from IBM and HP and VMware and Pivotal and others, folks that have built many open source experts that have built other foundations, and we got in a room and we hammered out what's sort of that right balance. In the end, we end up with a set of bylaws that are roughly 90 pages. I encourage you to read them. They're very exciting. Written by one of the gentlemen in the audience here. That went through many negotiations and many big law firms inside of big companies, and in the end felt and built what we believe is a good balance between business and the technical community. So how do you balance the money with the developers, and how do you make sure that the right interests are represented on each side? At its base is this concept of governance by contribution, which means that your influence in the foundation is based on what you're giving to the foundation. And that could be either monetary on one side of the house, or more importantly, development and code on the other side of the house. And I'll talk a minute about that. We use the Apache license, we use the Apache CLA, so we want to keep IP clean. And in the end, big enterprises run this platform, and IP is important. And we introduced an idea called Dojos, which is sort of an accelerated path to committers. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute. So in the end, it's sort of this church and state sort of separation, where you have a balance of power. You have the technical community, my pair programmers on the left, really influenced by developer contributions. It's a merit-based society. You show up, you do real work, you get influence. The other side of the house is the business side, where really influence is based on monetary contributions. And there's a separation for a reason. On the sort of business side of the house, their responsibility is IP, it's marketing budget, it's bylaws, and it's sort of certification and trademark usage. So it's the business side. You have a board of directors, and you can read through all the documents and get the details, but what you'll find is that all of those companies, the 44 companies that are contributing to Cloud Foundry, are all part of really that business side of the house and managing that $5 million budget to make Cloud Foundry a household name and drive the right brand and make sure our certification stands up, etc. On the other side of the house is the Developer Society. Broken that up into pretty common structure that you'll see in other open source foundations. It starts at the project level where stuff gets built and developers work together and actually build things. We build those based on Pivotal Tracker and story trackers, and this concept of a dedicated committer is the folks that determine content and priority. Projects are bundled into project management committees or PMCs, so think of functional grouping of these projects where they decide who gets to be a dedicated committer. So money doesn't buy you influence on the technical side. You earn your stripes on the technical side, you're made a committer, and then you get influence. PMCs also coordinate project themes and sort of help drive the life cycle. So what goes into incubation, when does it graduate into active, etc. Above that is the idea of a PMC council, which really coordinates across PMCs. So you can think about a feature that you may need in runtime to make a build pack work, so therefore you have a council above them that kind of bridges that gap. They could deal with disputes, so in these things you build in bad actor provisions, and we hope to never vote, but if so, there's voting mechanisms, etc. And the PMC Council owns this idea of required projects, which ties into our certification, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Point here is real separation of sort of influence based on what you're bringing to the table. One of the concepts is a dojo, and I think Dojo's interesting. The first point I would make about a dojo is it's not required. It is not the only path to committers. I think a lot of people think that. It is the fastest path to committer. The general idea of a dojo is you join the team, you pair program, so you pair program with the team that's based in either here in California, New York, Boulder, London. I believe some of the other platinums are looking to spend some up in Europe and Asia, etc. But the idea is you join the team, you pair program, you commit code, you learn the team, you learn the methodology, and 6 weeks later you leave a dedicated. At that point you go home to where it is you live, wherever it is you work, and you keep your committer status and keep working on the project. So it's a very quick way of getting into committership. It also helps real high quality code early on. There is the other path, which is pull requests, and if you notice the stats, I went really quickly, but we do lots of pull requests, and a lot of code comes in that way as well. So that's one thing that I think is a little bit different about our foundation. The other thing, and this is my last slide, we introduced 2 certification programs as part of the formation. And the intent here is really 2 things. One is for end users or consumers of the technology to feel comfortable knowing that when you're using the brand and you say you're certified as a PaaS distribution, for example, you have the same required projects in your implementation as anyone else that uses that brand. So, if you look at the spot, like Pivotal, IBM, all these folks are signed up, and what will happen is you will ship the bits of these required projects. And it's not an API compatibility where you end up with vendors sort of trying to game the system and build a better engine in the core. Instead, it's you ship the bits. And the value of that is you get interoperability, but you also get lots of innovation in open source. And you get people contributing to open source, and you have a better open source project and a better platform, and everybody moves beyond that. The second piece is the Cloud Foundry compatible certification. And this is about build packs and whether it be NoSQL databases or messaging services, etc., that they can run against any certified Cloud Foundry PaaS. So to really kind of help end users navigate that storm of services and build packs, knowing that if it's a certified PaaS, it'll run with a certified a certified extension, and all should run well. So that's the foundation in 10 minutes.